Welcome to the Phil Steele Plus Tour with selections for September the 22nd. A nice 3-2 week for the selections. Just last week brings the record to 29-18, 62% the last 9 weeks. I put a lot of effort, a lot of work into these selections each and every week. Hopefully we will have another productive winning week this week. I've got 6 selections for you today, 4 quick hitters, and then 3 FCS games, which I think you'll find interesting. And once again, the purpose of this tour is so that you can use all the things on the Phil Steele Plus site the same way that I do when I'm looking up the games. I do not even venture to look at a game without having my Phil Steele Plus open, and you can become a Phil Steele Plus subscriber for just $99. All right, how about the HEG game of the week? 2 weeks ago is Middle Tennessee State against Missouri, an easy cover. And last week, how about Florida over Tennessee? Those are covers by 17 and 19.5 points. Let's see what we got here for the first one. And as you could tell, we're leading off with SMU against TCU. TCU is 7-point home favorite here. But the amazing thing here is, let's take a look a little bit closer. Now, the AGG, as I've been explaining to you, has nothing to do. There is no starting grade. In other words, if Oklahoma played, or let's say SMU played this schedule, or an FCS team played this schedule and had these results, or Georgia played this schedule and had these results, the AGG would be exactly the same. It has nothing to do with the team. It only has to do with the opponent they played and the stats they put up. And when we look at SMU, the first thing that jumps out at me, let's take a look at their AGG. It's 115.5. They're a 2-1 team. TCU, the 7-point favorite, is 2-1. They're playing to an AGG of 102.2. That means that the AGG, or the average game grade, says SMU should be favored by 10.5 points, and they're a 7-point dog in this one. The key probably is this Oklahoma game. Oklahoma is one of the top teams in the AGG. And by the way, on Friday, we're going to list the AGG on the site. We're going to have a rankings of the top teams all the way down to the bottom. It'll give you the grades. You could see it right here that they're number 13 and they're number 46 in the AGG. But we'll put that up on the site today, sometime during the day. But anyway, let's go back to this. SMU, if you go click on the Oklahoma game, this is a game they lost 28-11. In fact, Oklahoma actually covered that game. But we'll click on the box score. And once again, collegepressbox.com allows me to put the box scores up here, which I love. And every game, every week, I go through every play of every game. I watch them. I've got the 12 TVs up. I'm watching them all day long. And then when I do the recap of the game, I go through and do the play-by-play. Well, if you go through the SMU, let's just look at the top right here. We can cut to the chase. In the fourth quarter, middle of the fourth quarter, they're only trailing Oklahoma 14-11. Oklahoma drives 75 yards for a touchdown. I believe SMU either got stopped on downs or turned it over, and Oklahoma added a touchdown on a short 30-yard drive. They got a 27-yard TD pass. Misleading final here, 28-11. SMU really gave Oklahoma a good game, only trailed by 3 in the fourth quarter. So that we've got an SMU team that's got an AGG of 115.5, TCU 102.2. But like I said last week with Florida, wait, there's more. When you click on the SMU TCU here, you get the complete 26 years matchups. And one thing I want to point out over here, let's take a look at the home team. And I'll show you how to use this. If this number is red, that means they lost the game. If this number is green, they won the game. So at a glance, you could tell how many games they've lost and how many games they've won. You don't have to look at the score, try to figure out who won. Same thing over here. This tells you the spread. If this is green, that means that SMU covered the game. If this is red, that means TCU covered the game. Once again, you don't have to go, okay, they won by 3, they were +8, so they covered. No, this tells you right off the bat whether they covered or not. Over here, the home team, the word win or loss means if they won or lost straight up. And as you can tell, the visitors doing well in this series. But the color tells you who covered. And look at this. The last 8 times that SMU and TCU have met here in the battle for the Iron Skillet, the visitor is 7-0-1 against the spread. It figures because the teams are very close by. It's not much of a trip at all. So the visitor 7-0-1 against the spread. The AGG says SMU by 10.4. And the Mustangs are a 7-point dog to TCU. We're taking SMU +7 over TCU as your first selection today. Now, the situational game last week, I got to admit, guys, I was a little nervous putting it out last week with Nevada plus the points over Kansas, because Nevada had just played a horrible game against Idaho. They had lost to Idaho by 27 points, got outgained by 197 yards. So I was a little bit concerned putting them out plus 28 against a red-hot Kansas team. But we did it as the situational game of the week. And I just watched that game. And if you go back and take a look, I mean, they actually played them even up. At the line of scrimmage, it was not a dominating game. And this is 24-24 in the fourth quarter. Kansas drives 75 yards, pulls ahead 31-24 to escape with the win. But Nevada played a really good game. I like what I saw to Brandon Lewis, the quarterback. Remember, he started at Colorado. Sean Dollars is a transfer from Oregon. So I like what I saw to Nevada in that game last week. But the situational game this week, let's pull it up. We're going to put Utah State on the right, and we're going to put James Madison on the left. Now, one quick note, and I hope you guys are using this. We've got up here on the Phil Steele Plus site. If you go, let me show you where it's at. Go to the menu on Phil Steele Plus. And when you go here, it's schedule with power rating forecasts. Okay, so you would click there. This comes up, and then all I want you to do is click here. Click here to download, and then this will appear on your screen. Now, just last night, I went through and updated the records for the entire season for all the different categories. And we've got some good best bet records here. The best bet record here for the plus-minus power ratings, 13-6 on the year. The best bet record, and best bets are in gold or in green here. So you could tell right here who the best bet is. Now, you do have to think a little bit. For example, you have to see, okay, Wake Forest by 3.5. The line is 14. It likes the underdog as the best bet. It doesn't mean that it likes Kansas State necessarily. It's telling you who they like. The best bet means there's a 10-point difference. So when there's a 10-point difference or more, the AGG is 19-11 this year. You got to like that. The situation, which won last week, is 18-6. And I got a bunch of situation plays down here. I'm not going to show you them here. If you're a Phil Steele Plus member, go to that schedule, check it out, look at all the best bets. We got a ton of them this week in all the different categories. The revenge category is 5-1 this year. There are a bunch of revenge plays this week. The strength of schedule I just put up for the first time because we actually have some strength of schedule. And all of these have best bets down below. You get yourself a plethora of best bets each week to look at. And when you go to the top and take a look at this whole thing, if this is what's at the top. It goes through every single week. And I've got all the records there. They're updated weekly for each category and all the way down to our current week 4. So there's your records right now. But anyway, the situational plays have been doing extremely well, 18-6. And what this is on the situational plays is if it's a positive number, that means play the home team. If it's a negative number, that means play the visitor. So keep that in mind. These best bets, that positive number meant play the home team. Here, when Colorado State played Colorado, it was a -4 last week. That says play the visitor because it's a negative number. Positive numbers play the home team. Positive numbers play the home team. Positive number home team, positive number home team. Negative number means play the visitor. Keep that in mind when you're using the situations. But let's take a look at this week's situation. Once again, 18-6, a bunch of situational plays this week. Head over to your Phil Steele Plus. And by the way, when you get a subscription to Inside the Press Box, you get Phil Steele Plus absolutely free. I'm going to just be a little ADD for a minute here and switch over to something I want to show you for this week. Click on the YPP defense. Something I want to point out. Look at this, the YPP defense. Ohio State giving up 3.6 yards per play. Notre Dame 3.8. That's number 2 and 3 in the country. You might go with the under in that game, guys. Same thing here with Michigan against Rutgers, number 7, number 11 in the YPP. And then this tells you who the worst teams are. Nevada was down there at the bottom, 8.7. In the YPP. Tulsa's here at 7.3, but this gives you a good idea of how many yards a team gives up per play they faced during the season so far. So keep in mind, Ohio State Notre Dame under might be a good play this week. But let's take a look at this James Madison play against Utah State. It's actually on Utah State plus the points over James Madison as your situational play this week. And take a look at it a little bit closer. Now, first of all, let's look at my AGG on the game. It's got Utah State 96, and it's got James Madison 95.5. Now, keep in mind, Utah State's at home. I believe it's a 3.5-point edge. They've got the altitude. It's a long trip. James Madison's got to travel from the East Coast all the way out to the West Coast and play in altitude. Give them like a 4-point home edge here. That's 100 for Utah State. That's 95.5 for James Madison. That's saying Utah State wins the game by 4.5, and they're a 5.5-point underdog. So the AGG likes Utah State. But the reason I put it as a situational play is, first of all, you look at Utah State. Now, they're off a Friday night loss, so they have an extra day to prepare. They're at home. They do well at home. They beat Idaho State 78-28. The two teams they lost to on the road were Iowa and Air Force, two really good teams, and they lost to them both on the road. Now they're at home, almost in a must-win situation. So it favors Utah State. This is an important game for them. And who do they have on deck? Connecticut. So you talk about a 1-2 team that's in a must-win situation. You got yourself Utah State this week, plus the AGG likes them. Now let's take a look at James Madison. When I talked to Coach Signetti over after spring practice was over, we talked about this non-conference slate. He said James Madison fans wanted to beat Virginia. He knew it was important to beat Virginia. In-state, Power 5 team, huge game, and guess what? Goes down to the wire, 36-35. James Madison trailed 35-24. They get a touchdown. They get a touchdown with 55 seconds left, and they escape. A huge game. They needed to win that game. It's a state rival. The next week, they play a conference game on the road. That's Troy. Massive game. Playing Troy in the conference. They're a slight dog. Guess what? Goes to the wire. And James Madison pulls it out. 16-14. A tough game. A 2-point win. If you go back and look at the play-by-play, there was plenty of... Let's take a look just real quick. You can go through here and go through the entire play-by-play of the game. I believe in the fourth quarter that Troy had the ball with a chance. Like here, they're down at the 38-yard line. 33-yard line. They're driving. They're at the 43. So Troy had the ball in James Madison territory, down by 2 with chances at the end of the game. So 2 tight, huge ball games. Virginia on the road, huge. Troy on the road, huge. And guess what's next? South Alabama, another conference game. Massive conference game. If they want to prove their worth in the Sun Belt, they've got to win these games. What's the least important game of these 4? This non-conference, non-state, travel across the country and play Utah State. You're 3-0. You've got a massive game on deck. This is a flat spot for James Madison. Utah State, it's not a flat spot. They need this game badly. So the situation says Utah State plus 5.5 over James Madison. We've got extra time. They're taking a long trip. Situational plays on Phil Steele Plus, 18-6 this year. Make sure you check out all of his situational plays. This is my favorite one of the week. Take Utah State plus 5.5 over James Madison. All right, we haven't had a red... last year I went back and looked at the file, and I said, how many games did I officially title red-green games? I love red-green games. 2 years ago, we were using them all the time. I found one. I found a red-green game, guy. We're going to use Oregon versus Colorado for this one. What's a red-green game? Well, you know that Phil Steele Plus... That thing that we can't do in the magazine. I'd like to do this in the magazine where the good numbers are in green, the bad numbers are in red. It just jumps out at you when you've got a line of scrimmage advantage like this. But in the magazine, the numbers aren't very readable when we put them in colors, so that's why we put them in black, because they're more readable. But here on Phil Steele Plus, you get the red-green, and here is a red-green game. Now, last year we only used one, and it was a winner. This year, I like this one a lot. First of all, Colorado is playing at 2:30 in the morning against Colorado State. Their third massive game. Fired up for the big upset at TCU. Fired up for the first home game against Nebraska. Fired up with everybody on the sidelines for Colorado State. Game ends at 2:30 in the morning. Do you have anything left in the tank? Sort of sets up as a situational play. Check out Phil Steele Plus to see if it did make it as a situational play this week. But what I make for a red-green game, look at the Colorado rush offense. They don't have one. They have averaging 61 yards per game rush, 2.0 yards per carry. And even with Shedeur Sanders and his mobility, they have given up 16 sacks on the year. That would be probably 26 sacks with a different quarterback. Meanwhile, Oregon runs the ball, 7.1 yards per carry, 224 yards per game on the ground. They stopped the run, only allowing 127 yards per game. Colorado gives up 195. Look at the red in here. That's an interesting point there. So you've got red and red, you've got green and green, you've got the situation. And then when we take a look at the series history, if they add into it, let's look at this. Once again, Oregon has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9-1 straight up, 8-2 against the spread. Not a lot of thought has to go into it. We've got things color-coded red and green for you. You are not doing the math. You are not saying, okay, they're minus 39. It was 57-16, or so 39 would have been 55. They covered. No, the math's done for you. 8-2 against the spread, 9-1 straight up. So you've got the series history, you got the situation, you got the red-green. Lay the points. We're going with Oregon minus 21 over Colorado. And something else I want to point out: my boy Todd has got our last 10 years results up, and take a look at how Dan Lanning has done at home. 4-1. And 1-0. So he's 5-1 at home against the spread. And the thing I love about this, it takes you into conference play. Let's see how he does as a favorite, double-digit favorite. Oh, look at this. Dan Lanning, 5-2 is a double-digit favorite. Can Dan Lanning cover when he's a 20 or more point favorite? 2-0. You know, we've got this box up here in the magazine. Look at all this stuff that you get with Phil Steele Plus down here. Versus ranked teams, top 10 teams, conference dog, conference favorite, double-digit favorite, favorite of 20 or more. And then if you want to know how teams are doing this year, just go to the Phil Steele Plus menu. I imagine a lot of you guys fill in your magazine. I appreciate that. I love the pictures of you guys filling in your magazine. I fill in my magazine. But if you don't fill in your magazine, you want to just go to the college ATS logs. You can go right here, and you want to see how Oregon's doing this year. Win, win, win. You want to see how they do as a double-digit favorite. Now, that's at 2-0. 20-plus favorite. How about 3-0? How about 4-0? They won their games 81-7 and 55-10 as a 38 and 48 point favorite. These logs are updated every week. The FCS logs will be updated later this week. The NFL logs are updated right there. These are all at your fingertips on Phil Steele Plus. So you've got Dan Lanning, 4-0 when favored by 20-plus. You got a lot of good stuff going on this one. It's our first red-green game of the year, and we're going with Oregon, minus 21 over Colorado. All right, let's go to your angle of the week, and this one's fun. Nobody knows anything about Sam Houston. Do you know anything about Sam Houston? Well, of course you do. You read the magazine. If you're a Phil Steele magazine reader, you know everything about every team in the country. But did you really read the Sam Houston write-up? Come on, guys. Be honest. Did you read the Sam Houston write-up? All right. So anyway, let's go to Houston. Sam Houston is playing Houston. Houston is in the Big 12. I was looking in the American for a minute there. All this conference shifting gets you thinking. Houston so far this year is minus 83, minus 27, minus 298. They're being outgained by 136 yards per game. Now, granted, they played 3 decent opponents. One of them was Rice. And Sam Houston's played 2 good opponents, BYU and Air Force. In fact, Sam Houston has covered both games. Now, their offense has struggled, but BYU and Air Force, I showed you Air Force is right at the top of that defensive YPP. So you had 2 really good defenses that they played. They're only putting up 133 yards per game, but look at this defense. 257, 258 yards, only being outgained by 125 yards per game. Covered against BYU, covered against Air Force. So it's 2 straight dog covers. Let's take a look here. You take a look as a dog. They were a dog here, home dog 2, so that's 4 straight, 6 straight, 9 straight. Sam Houston has covered 12 straight games as a dog. You can look in your magazine. Take it back. We got the last 5 years spread records for all the FCS teams, even in the FCS magazine, but we brought it over for Sam Houston. Nobody has spread logs on the FCS for the last 5 years. Oh, except Phil Steele Plus. It's got them for the last 6 years, FCS spread logs. Now let's take a look at Houston last 10 years straight up in ATS. Home favorite, 0-6. In fact, Dana Holgerson lost as a home favorite this year against UTSA. So that is 0-7 against the spread. So they've lost 7 in a row as a home favorite. And Sam Houston has covered 12 in a row as a dog. And now let's take a look at the AGG. Sam Houston, 90.1. Houston, 89.8. Yes, Sam Houston's 0-2. But that says this is a tight game. Sam Houston is plus 12.5. And then look at the situation, guys. Houston played their conference opener last week against TCU. Conference opener on deck against Texas Tech. Struggle as a favorite. Sam Houston State's fresh off a bye. You talk about another situational game. You talk about an AGG game. You talk about an angle game. This one's got it all. Let's take Sam Houston State plus 12.5 over Houston. All right, I got two more plays for you guys. You know what? Before I get to those other two plays, let's talk about a couple other things. Let's switch over to the FCS for a minute. My boy Chris is doing a great job with the FCS. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't had the time to look over the FCS games. Chris follows the FCS religiously. He's got a pretty strong play right off the bat. In fact, he's going to list this one as a double play this week. We're going to put Western Carolina on the right, and we're going to put Charleston Southern on the left. You don't know anything about these teams? Well, guess what? You're about to learn a whole lot about them just because you're a Phil Steele Plus user. First of all, Western Carolina, last year they were 3, 6, and 5. One thing I remember about Western Carolina, when I just noticed this when I was looking at Phil Steele Plus, Kerwin Bell's their head coach. Well, guess what? Kerwin Bell took over in a tough situation right here. He took over a losing team that had only won one win, and he did something like Dion. He just had a complete transformation of the roster, brought in a ton of transfers. Guess what? It took him a long time to acclimate. He lost his first 6 games as a head coach. Then he went 4-1. Then last year, guess what? Boom, winning season, 6-5. This year, 2-1, and one of the losses is to Arkansas. And while they lost that game by 43, look at this. They were only out first down 21-18. They were only outgained 379-291. That's a pretty good game right there. So I liked what he's doing. They beat Samford. Samford is number 7 in the country, and they beat them 30-7 with a 546, 361-yard edge. And then they beat Eastern Kentucky on the road 27-24. And Eastern Kentucky, by the way, only lost to Kentucky the previous week 28-17. Now, Charleston Southern took on North Greenville. And ignore this game grade here. We're going to get those fixed. The reason it's at that game grade is North Greenville is not even an FCS team. They're a Division II team. So we're going to get the power rating fixed there so it doesn't come up as a negative. But they actually trailed North Greenville 10-3 in the fourth quarter, a Division II team. This Clemson game was misleading. They led Clemson 14-7, right? I think the yards when they led Clemson 14-7 were 183-1 in favor of Clemson. They got a return touchdown and another return to the one. Has had 1 yard of offense and 14 points. They had 4 first downs for the game. Got out first down 37-4, and that's because Clemson put all their backups in the fourth quarter. And then last week they had 77 yards offense against William & Mary. Now, if there's an Achilles heel for Western Carolina, it's right here, pass defense. But they took on KJ Jefferson and 2 FCS All-American type of quarterbacks. They took on 3 really good QBs. Now they're taking on Tony Bartolo. Now, Tony is hitting 42% with an 0-1 ratio, and they are throwing for 74 yards per game. I don't think their weakness is going to be exposed here. I like Western Carolina. Chris likes Western Carolina. -10 over Charleston Southern. Let's use it as a double play. And once again, all this information on every FCS team right at your fingertips. I'm going to run through the other 2 FCS games. I do have 2 more solid selections for you and 4 quick hitters you're going to love. But let's get rolling here just so you can see all the information that's up here on the FCS. And if you haven't got that FCS magazine already, 2 full pages on every FCS team, spread records for the last 5 years, all updated there. In fact, here's your last 6 years spread logs on the FCS at your fingertips. You don't even have to get the magazine. They're right here on Phil Steele Plus. Just click there. Your individual player stats for the season, they're updated weekly. You could see how Hajik Malik Williams, they've been there like 6 years at Campbell. I should put Campbell on the right because they're the favorite. They're the home team. And I'm going to put Elon on the left. Now, Elon did make the playoffs last year, but if you read the magazine, they did lose a lot off of last year's squad. I believe they lost their quarterback, a couple other people. Yeah, Matthew McKay gone from last year. I believe he was an NC State transfer. And so in their opener, they did lose only to Wake Forest 37-17. They lost to Gardner-Webb, and then they beat a poor North Carolina A&T team. Let's see how good North Carolina A&T is. Click on them over here, North Carolina A&T. They lost to UAB by that's Sioux Central and Elon. They're playing in a power rating of 54.5. So anyway, Elon right now is at 78.3. You're looking at Campbell is playing at an average game grade of 83.8. So right there, you've got a 5-point difference. Figure about a 10-point difference here. Campbell's a 1-point favorite. And the one thing Chris pointed out is Campbell's actually had back-to-back number one recruiting classes in the FCS. So they've got talent. They've got a fifth-year starting quarterback who's hitting 75% with a 5-0 ratio. And Elon only has 3 starters back on defense. So add it all up, we're going to go with Campbell -1 over Elon. And the final FCS game to look at, we're going to look at Eastern Washington against Eastern Washington's over here. UC Davis is over here. UC Davis is at home for this one, and they are laying 6 points. But we're going to go with Eastern Washington. Eastern Washington is a team that last week beat a decent Southeast Louisiana State team 40-29, earned a 97 game grade. Look at this. They went into Fresno State and outgained them and only lost the game by 3. That's Fresno State. Who'd they play in the opener? North Dakota State. One of the best teams in the FCS. So that's a pretty rough schedule they've played so far. They did have a poor year last year, but you know Eastern Washington. They're always good. And Eastern Washington appears to be regaining its mojo this year. They've got a quarterback hitting 62%. They've got a defense that's holding foes to 390 yards per game. Meanwhile, over here for UC Davis, like Dan Hawkins, heck of a coach. They are at home, but they did lose to Oregon State badly. Only beat Southern Utah by 2, and Texas A&M Commerce that game there. But you look at the AGG, it's saying Eastern Washington by 8. They're getting 6 points here. They played within 3 of Fresno, so you got to like that. So we are going to go with Eastern Washington +6 over UC Davis. All right, let's get to your selections. Then I'll bounce some quick hitters off you. Once again, just go to the FBS team page. Once again, it's right here on the menu. Click on the menu. I'm clicking on it, and nothing's happened. There we go. And when you click here, you just go under team pages. You go FBS, you go FCS, you go NFL if you want. If you look under the NFL, we even have this updated for you. The offensive and defensive YPG versus opponent average. The Rams are actually number 1 at the top. Miami's up there. Dallas is up there. At the very bottom, the Chicago Bears. Does that surprise you that they're down there? That, of course, is what we use for the college and the FCS. We have all that. Take a look at the Browns, for example. The Browns this year are holding opponents to 62 yards below their season average. Their offense is putting up 24 yards less than what their opponents allow. Granted, there's only 2 games into the season so far. They've outgained their opponent by 208, 153 yards. Tough blow losing Nick Chubb last week. But look at that. They had a 20-9 first down edge. Tough loss. 2 defensive touchdowns for Pittsburgh on that Monday night game last week. But that gives you, we have the same records. We've got individual stats updated if you're a fantasy football player. If you're a fantasy football player, you can go back and take a look right here. Individual player stats for last year. How did Kareem Hunt do against this team? Of course, they also were handing the ball off to Nick Chubb a lot. I got to feel that Kareem Hunt's going to get a good portion of the carries coming up for the Browns. They just re-signed him. But all that's available at your fingertips for the NFL as well. So you do want to check that out. I don't put a lot of NFL here. I'm a college guy. But my site gives you a ton of NFL action, and it'll be updated each week. But let's get back to our team pages. Let's get back to our next game. I'm going to call this a check mark game. I'm going to say check, check, and check when we go through this one. All right. Indiana is hosting Akron. And we're going to put Akron on the left because they're the visitor, and we're going to put Indiana on the right. Don't you like to do this for every single game every week? Put one on the left, one on the right. You check everything out. Look at Akron's run game. It jumps out. You don't even have to think. You just go, oh, look at all this red. They are poor running the football. 44 yards per game, 1.7. Look at Indiana's defense. They held Ohio State to 142 yards below their season average. They held Indiana State to 146 yards below their season average. They held Louisville to 160 yards below their season average. That's number 8 in the country, holding opponents to 151 yards per game below their season average. And by the way, these numbers down here do not reflect an FCS game. So it's only the 142, 160 here. We only count the FBS games down here for the average. But if you got a team holding opponents to 151 yards per game below their season average, and Akron's averaging 260, does that mean Akron gets 109 yards offense? Let's put a check mark by that one. Now let's take a look at the AGG. 101.8 versus 79.3. That says Indiana by 26.2. AGG says check mark Indiana. And then how about Indiana as a double-digit favorite? Well, you know what? That's not in your magazine, but it is here on philsteele.com. Double-digit favorite. They were 0-1 last year. 1-0, 2-0, 4-1. That's 6-1, 7-1, 7-2. And once again, go to your menu. You want to look up the logs for this week. Let's go to the logs, college ATS logs. Let's go to Indiana, and we will see that Indiana. Don't you like having all this information at your fingertips each week? They were playing Indiana State. They were minus 30.5, and they covered. They won the game by 34. That's 8-2 against the spread as a double-digit favorite. So first thing that pops your head is, can a bad team cover as a heavy favorite? The thing with Indiana and Tom Allen, they do cover as a home favorite. They've always had a good record as a home favorite. These are the games they need to win. These are the games they take seriously. And in the opener against Ohio State, if we take a look at Tavon Jackson, they didn't throw the ball a lot. Tavon Jackson was 1 of 5. They ran mostly option. They have let Tavon Jackson pass the last 2 weeks. And I love this about the individual stats. 236, 299 passing. They can throw the football. Last week, Akron gave up 450 yards, 315 yards passing at Kentucky. And if you're Akron, you just played Kentucky. You've got your opener against Buffalo. I can beat Buffalo, right? You're thinking you could beat Buffalo. That's a huge game. Do you really put a lot into the Indiana game, or do you sort of mail this one in and worry about Buffalo and Northern Illinois, which is struggling, and Central Michigan, which is struggling, and Bowling Green, which is a possible game? Akron, you know where your bread's buttered. That's MAC play. So we're going to take Indiana. We're going to lay the 16.5. It's 3 checks. You've got the defense against the offense. You got the AGG. You got the double-digit favorite. 3 checks on Indiana, minus 16.5 over Akron. Now let's get to our off-a-loss game of the week. And this one I don't even need to bring up the opponent, but I will. Tennessee is playing UAB. It can't hurt to look. Let's pull UAB up over here. Now, UAB, one thing I do want to point out about them, they only lost by 20 points against Louisiana last week, right? That's not bad. I mean, I liked Louisiana. Louisiana won. Granted, that's much worse than the spread. The spread was a close line. Louisiana blew them out. Let's take a look at this box score. With 5 minutes to go in the game, it is 41-3. You got that? 41-3. UAB drives 75 yards in 9 plays. This is your drives right here. 75 yards, 9 plays, touchdown. Then an interception. Why is Louisiana throwing a football with 1:33 left, or a little less than 2 minutes to go in the game? They throw an interception. They drive 4 yards in 2 plays for a touchdown. Then a fumble. How about 28 yards and 7 plays for a touchdown? And amazingly, that touchdown came with 10 seconds left. 3 touchdowns in the last 4 minutes and 10 seconds, and all of a sudden 41-3 looks a lot better at 41-21. So UAB's off a misleading final last week. I believe that one even made bad beats with Scott Van Pelt. Great. I check that segment out each and every week. I love it. I usually capture most of them, but then there are a couple that surprised me. Like that one, I didn't know it impacted the total. I didn't think it impacted the spread at all. I was surprised it was on bad beats. Then I found out it impacted the total of the game, those 3 touchdowns. But now let's take a look at Tennessee. Tennessee last week, we went against them, guys. Remember? We had the situation. We had the AGG. We had everything going against them, and they haven't looked great. They only beat Austin Peay by 17, for crying out loud. Now they're laying 21 to UAB. But let's look at this a little bit closer. When they came off a loss against Georgia, what'd they do? They beat Missouri 66-24. They came off a loss to South Carolina. They beat Vanderbilt 56-0. They came off a loss to Pittsburgh. They beat Tennessee Tech 56-0. They came off a loss to Florida. They beat Missouri 62-24. Now, they came off a loss to Ole Miss, but they were a huge underdog against Alabama, so we're going to throw that one out. They did come off a loss against Alabama and only beat Kentucky by 3. They covered that game. That game was pick'em. So they are perfect against the spread. Came off a loss against Georgia. They beat South Alabama 60-14. This is a team that is 6-0 against the spread off a loss when they're not a double-digit dog. And their average win is by 40 points per game. And they're taking on a UAB team that trailed 41-3 against Louisiana last week. Lock it in as play number 6. We're going Tennessee minus 21 over UTSA. All right, let's get some quick hitters. I'll try to make them quick. I don't want to have this thing last a huge long time here. We're going to take a look at Clemson against Florida State. We're going to put Clemson on the right, and we are going to put Florida State on the left. And this one's got a couple things I want to point out. First of all, if you take a look at your last 10 there, now this is in your magazine. We got straight up records, but they have lost a grand total of one home game since 2017. One home game. They're a home underdog. Oh, how do they do as a home underdog? Let's take a look at that. Once again, sorry, I got clicked off the page there. Let's click on last 10 years results. Home dog, 2-1 in that role. Only once as a home dog since 2014. One outright in that one. And then let's take a look at the series history here. When you look at the series history, Clemson has won the last 7 games. In fact, last year was 34-28 on the road. They won by 10, they won by 31, they won by 49, they won by 17. So all of them have basically been double digits. And the one thing I want to point out about last year, you can go back and look at last year's box scores if you want right here. And we're going to see that in this game, Clemson actually led 34-14 in the fourth quarter. Florida State got 2 fourth-quarter touchdowns to pull within 6. So add it all up. We've got Clemson, a team that's only lost once at home the last 6 years, great as a home dog, has beaten Florida State 7 straight, led last year's game by 20 points on the road. Now they're at home. Everybody's talking Florida State. Clemson is under the radar. And that Duke game, remember they had a 29-17 first down edge, 37-4. And last week, FAU, one thing I want to point out about this game, this 33-yard touchdown pass, that's a halfback option touchdown pass against Clemson's third string with 1:03 left in the game. Cancel that touchdown out. 48-7. Their other touchdown, also fourth quarter, is 41-0 in the fourth quarter. You know Clemson likes to play a lot of backups in the fourth quarter. All right, let's take a look at the Arkansas-LSU game this week. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. LSU dominated last week, okay? And I watched the Arkansas. Arkansas lost for me. I had Arkansas as a best bet in the inside the press box last week. We were up by double digits a couple times. I'm like, yeah, the crowd's there. We're going to roll. And they lost. And I'm like, oh, I just want to crinkle up Arkansas and throw them in the trash bin. I'm going to go with LSU for crying out loud. Arkansas sucks. That was my Saturday night reaction. But cooler heads prevail. And we take a look at this. First of all, Arkansas had a 424 to 281 yard edge. They had a 21-17 first down edge. It's not like BYU beat them at the line of scrimmage. They had a 177-77 rush edge. They outpassed them. They outrushed them. They outplayed them. They just didn't win on the thing. That happens sometimes. So I'm not as down on Arkansas. Then you take a look at this part here, which is your last 3 games. Look at this. They lost by 3. They won by 3. They lost by 3. The last 3 games have been decided by a grand total of 3 points in LSU's favor. And LSU is right now laying 17.5. Let's go back to that for a minute. If you go back and look at the spread, Arkansas gets pumped up for LSU. Remember all those post-Thanksgiving ones? I would just play Arkansas straight. Every year, I would take Arkansas. Look at this. Cover, 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 cover. They get more fired up for LSU than LSU gets fired up for Arkansas. Just looking down the line here, I won't bother you with the math, but Arkansas is 11-4-1 against the spread. Outgained BYU. Series has been 3 points each of the last 3 years. I'm going to take Arkansas plus the 17.5 against LSU. Let's go to look at that Rutgers Michigan game. And I talked about the possibility of using the under in that. But I also like Rutgers plus the 24 for a couple of reasons. First of all, let's go back and look at Michigan's game against BYU or Bowling Green last week. It's only 14-6 at the half. And granted, it's a game where you're looking ahead maybe to Big Ten play. But look at this. A 2-yard drive after a turnover to open the third quarter. A 4-yard drive after a turnover. Or it's a 1-yard drive, I should say. And a 2-yard drive. That's yards is 1, plays is 2. 4 yards, 2 plays. 2 turnovers gave them 14 points. You take away those turnovers, it's still a 14-6 game when they get a 50-yard touchdown pass. The offense basically only scored 17 points last week for Michigan, and they're taking on a Rutgers defense that's playing pretty well. Now, once again, their numbers are 273, but they haven't played the same competition Indiana did. So they're holding their opponents to 94 yards per game below the season average, which is 32. That's less than Indiana. Even though they're better statistically, they haven't taken on the same type of offenses. Northwestern, Temple, and Virginia Tech are nothing compared to Ohio State and Louisville. So that's a beautiful thing of this category here. This means they held Northwestern. Northwestern's average, except for the Rutgers game, is 128 above. So it'd be 329 yards per game. Take away the Rutgers game. They held them to 129 below that. That's what this category does. This is your offense does the same, and this is your game grade. Now we take a look at Michigan over here. Game grade-wise, you're looking at 112 versus 105. That's only a 7. Even add in a 5-point home edge. That's 12. They're laying 24 points here. 2 of the last 3 games in this series, this might surprise you guys. Last year, Michigan beat them by 35. The previous game here in the Big House, decided by 7. The previous game to that was decided by 6. 2 of the previous 3 games have been decided by a touchdown or less. And the game here is 24. So we're going to take Rutgers plus 24 against Michigan. And for your final one, I'm just going to give you a peek inside the press box for this one, just to show you a page in the let's see if I can get there. There we go. There's your page. All right. This is a page of inside the press box. Now, this gives you your opponent rankings, which I find very valuable. It tells you, we could show that on the Indiana one, maybe their opponents played. This is where their offense ranked during the year, where their opponents ranked. That's all up here. But this is my computer's forecast. So I never do a game. This is my complete write-up on the game, by the way, over here. And this is my computer's forecast. My computer is actually calling for UTEP to have a 412 to 290-yard edge and win the game 24.4 to 21.8. They're a home dog. They're getting 2.5 in this one. And so this is a complete write-up. This is the last 26 years, which you can get on Phil Steele. This tells you the Vegas line, the Vegas total, the plus-minus rating, game grade, last 4 weeks game grade, last Met line, last score line, points. It's all right here on every page. We do that right up on every game, even FBS versus FCS. But when we look at this game a little bit closer, I'm going to put UTEP on the right, and we're going to put UNLV on the left. And this is UTEP. Got to figure out where the conferences are nowadays. And UNLV is on the left. UNLV did have a nice big win last week against Vanderbilt, so it is a little bit of a letdown situation. Huge win at home against an SEC team. You got Hawaii on deck, your conference opener. And meanwhile, with UTEP, remember last year they opened up poorly against North Texas. They opened up poorly against Oklahoma. They showed a little bit of life against New Mexico State. Then they lost to New Mexico by 17. Let's throw UTEP in the garbage can. They're hosting Boise State on a Friday. They have no chance against Boise. Guess what? 27 to 10. And nothing fluky about that game. If you look at the thing, they had a 322 to 177 yard edge, 17 to 14 first down edge, and beat a very good Mountain West team, Boise State, 27 to 10, even though they had been super disappointing coming in. It's a must win for UTEP. It's a circle the wagons game for UTEP. My computer says they have a yardage edge, and the AGG, guess what? 90.5. 86.8. How is that? These guys played Michigan and Vanderbilt. They beat Vanderbilt. These guys are 1-3. Their only win over Incarnate Wood. You know what? My computer doesn't look at the final scores. It looks at the numbers, and it looks at the opponents. And it says UTEP's actually playing better football than UNLV. So it may seem strange, but we're going to take UTEP plus 2.5 over UNLV. Well, I hope that showed you a lot of how to use Phil Steele Plus this week. And hopefully we have a nice big winning week this week. Like I said, we got 6 selections. We got 4 quick hitters. We got 3 FCS games. Thank you for those FCS games, Chris. And I'll be back with you next week with another edition of the Phil Steele Plus Tour with selections. Here's wishing you good luck this weekend.